fear is good.
I'll give you the red paddle. I'll give you the red paddle 3 minutes. I'm just going to close it.
Okay. This fits under the theme of hot, 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 in that it's a story about very intense love between 3 people. It's a true story. It's about myself and 2 of my best friends. We came from 3 totally different walks of life. I grew up a wealthy Jewish girl who, when she went to her Russian Jewish grandmother's house in New York City, we were served by black maids. And I always was the kid that said, well, why can't Lucille come and sit with us? And they say, shh, she belongs in the kitchen. And my friend Melanie, the other character in this story, was, I guess you'd call her a blue-collar Jew. And, and she grew up in a little house on Western Ave in Salem, Massachusetts. It was the last house on the end of the street with a metal fence and a sign that said, beware of the dog. And in that house, she was beaten on a daily basis by her mother. And she had 2 sisters, so it was 3 girls in that house. And my other character in the story is my friend David, who grew up on the streets of the same town, Salem. And he was raised by his mother. His father was a career criminal. He was always in prison. And David spent most of his childhood looking through a screen door waiting for his dad, who never showed up. And so how we all met is an interesting story, and whether you believe in God or not, I'd like to say God has a sense of humor, because he brought us all together in a very interesting and strange way. Though I was raised Jewish, I married into a Christian family, and I ended up belonging to a church. So I was like the renegade Jew hidden in this church, and I would play my violin there. And so one day I was up on the altar playing the violin, and my friend Melanie, who I hadn't met yet, was walking down the street, and she had been high for 2 weeks and doing heroin, and she had decided that she was going to kill herself. So she walked by the church, and she heard the violin coming out the windows, and she thought, well, I am a Jew, but that sounds good. Maybe I'll go in and check that out, and God, if you're there, could you do something to help me, because I'm at the end of my rope. So she came into the church and sat in the very back pew, and then she looked up at me, and she thought, who is that prissy white bread, is what she called me, white bread girl playing the violin up there? It's just so not cool. And then when I was done, I sat down. I sat in the front, and she sat in the back. And I looked over, and I saw this girl that was rocking in the back seat. Beautiful girl, looked like a supermodel. I don't know how she managed to look that way after 10 years of doing heroin and prostituting herself. But she was very striking. And I had my 3 little kids with me, at the time 5 and under. And I felt like I was supposed to go and sit with her. But everything in me said, don't go back there. That person's, you know, a loose cannon. But I couldn't stand the desire to go back, and I just obeyed it. I went back, I sat with her, and we sat there in silence for about 10 minutes, and she was rocking, and she was looking at me, and she told me later, she was thinking, who is this white girl? Why is she sitting with me? And so finally, to make me go away, she pulled up her sleeve, and she said, do you know who I am? Do you know what I do? I'm completely strung out right now, and I do heroin. And I said, well, that's really not that bad. I mean, you should see what I do. So I pulled up my sleeve, and what she didn't know is that I had had a staph infection for many years, and it was undiagnosed at the time, and my skin was literally hanging off my body underneath my clothing, and she was disgusted by it. So anyway, we became friends, and you know, God put us together in a very strange way. And then she met David, who also sat in the back row of the church. He had been in prison for 10 years, and so the story is that he fell in love with her, and the 2 of them had never really loved anybody before. And I try to fast forward this story, but we spent about a year chasing her, literally physically chasing her down streets, chasing her, pulling her off bridges, going into bathrooms where she was in there, you know, doing stuff for weeks. And we got her clean, and she was clean for about 6 months. And in that time, she healed every one of her broken relationships in her life with her family and her sisters. But unfortunately, one night, when David wasn't really paying as much attention as he normally did, he was really burnt out from watching her, she took a detour, and she got high one last time, and you know how the story would seem that would end. She OD'd, and she died 3 days later. And at that time, I had promised her I'd tell her story. I promised her I'd make it into a film one day. And so I thought, Melanie, how could you do this to me? You ruined the ending. But when I stood up and spoke at her funeral, I realized that though we had spent all this time trying to help her and chasing her, she was the one who had helped us. She was the one that helped David have love again, and she was the one that helped heal my life.